So it's supposed to be 90 degrees today. Thermometer's got it probably about 95, but it's still a beautiful day. No humidity. It's just really strange for the state of Missouri to not have high humidity. But there's a northerly breeze coming from the, well, kind of from the northeast, I guess. But it's better than nothing. This is just fantastic. I mean, amazing summer so far. I mean, we're not into July and August yet, but well, I guess tomorrow's July. So I've been talking to you about the differences between a prepper who preps for SHTF, is what they call it, and what we do here as a self-sustaining lifestyle, off-grid, being independent from things. I think I've shown pretty conclusively that we just have a better idea than preppers. Preppers stockpile, we reproduce. So like the chickens, for example. The chickens lay our eggs and we can eat them or incubate them and grow more, and that gives us meat, and plus the eggs have high amount of filling material versus eating rice, where rice is carbohydrates, so you eat it and a few minutes later you're hungry again. Whereas eggs, I can eat eggs and be satisfied well into supper time. Sometimes I'm not even hungry at supper time. You don't need to eat as much, so I eat 3 or 4 eggs in well, about brunch time, and I'm satisfied till supper time. And then we can have a couple more eggs, 3 or 4 eggs for supper, or we can eat the chicken that we hatched. That's kind of a self-sustaining idea. We've talked about how we're going to feed our chickens if SHTF ever happened, where we'll plant sunflower seeds, and that would give them their protein. If we don't have sunflower seeds, we can give them eggs. Eggs are like 93% protein. And then we can feed them the plant life around here. Now, a lot of people say we should let them free range, but free range is, I've explained many times, is very dangerous. We'd lose more in chickens being picked off by wildlife, and of course we'd lose eggs because they would lay eggs out somewhere and we wouldn't get them. So I don't have a problem cutting down some vegetation and giving it to them, and then plus the sunflower seeds. Now I've showed you, and I probably don't have an example. Yes, I do. I've showed you that Carolyn grows sunflower seeds in these bottles, and so she can turn 50 pounds of sunflower seeds into about 250 pounds. And we give this to them as a snack every night. With the chicks that are being raised right now from incubation, and the Brahmas, which we bought, they're still small, so we're trying to train them to go to bed at night. So we use that to train them to go to bed, and then we just throw in a handful for the big chicks. That gives them quite a bit of protein. That way we can cut back on the amount of protein that we have to buy or raise if we're getting, what, 3 or 4 times the amount. And then the calcium, the chickens need the calcium. Well, that's easy. Here you'll see Carolyn's sun dehydrator, and in there is eggshells. She cleans them up and then lets them dehydrate a little bit, and then she can crush them up. That gives them calcium. Now you got to realize that if you're going to give them eggshells, you got to give it to them at nighttime, right before bed, so the calcium is being used, because eggs tend to just go right through them, the eggshells. Whereas if you got oyster shells, that would sustain them all day, because they produce the eggs at night. They don't produce them, they grow them inside. Well, if they don't have any calcium, then they come out just with this membrane around them. It's kind of neat looking, actually. But you shouldn't eat those. These can have bacteria in them. So everything's about self-sustaining, reproducing, recycling, whereas with preppers, it's stockpile, stockpile, stockpile. Well, the problem with stockpiling is eventually you're going to run out of stockpiling. The interesting thing right now is we are maxed out, like on solar panels. Our refrigerator takes a lot of energy. So we use all the energy that we make, pretty much, especially in the wintertime. Wintertime is very difficult for us. So then we run propane. But the thing is if SHTF actually did happen, we wouldn't ever have to run propane. We would shut off the fridge. We could run the well off the solar panels then. Right now we run the well off the generator. We don't have to. On sunny days like this, these nice beautiful days, it's pretty easy to run the well. But on cloudy days, you would need a good 24 hours to recoup your energy, so the batteries would have time to charge back up. So we even have plans to simply just make life a little easier for us if things were to go bad. That way we wouldn't have to use all our propane. We got, I think, 10 to 20 pound cylinders, of propane. And then I take 2 into town every time I go grocery shopping. Well, it's usually 2, could be more than that, because the propane shop is right across the street basically from where we grocery shop. Well, of course, if SHTF ever happened, we wouldn't have that. Also, we wouldn't have gasoline. So I have a propane gasoline generator that I can use. I also have a gasoline generator. Now, I talked the other day about having to go out and get supplies, such as 22 shells. If somebody decides to hit the road and they abandon their house, of course, they're not going to take everything they own. So you might be able to find 22 shells in their house if you ever have to go scavenging when SHTF happens. And everybody has 22 shells, right? I mean, I explained all that in yesterday's video. Well, the same thing with gasoline. If you really think about it, vehicles have gasoline. Well, if you find an abandoned vehicle somewhere, you could take the gasoline from those vehicles and use it in your generator. Now, the problem with that is that's only for a given amount of time. After about a year, that gasoline is going to go bad. So that'll give you about a year's worth of gas that you could use if you needed to. But hopefully, we could wean ourselves off gas and propane pretty quickly just by simply shutting off the generator. So I have an easy amount of propane. I mean, there's no way we couldn't make it for another month. Let's say our freezer was full of food. We could run the freezer easily for another month and run the well pump, winning phases. That being said, what we would probably do is go ahead and can all the food that's in the freezer with a pressure canner in our jars. That way we'd be sure not to lose any of it. We could immediately shut off the refrigerator and save all our propane for emergency uses. On that rare occasion there might be a cloudy day and we're just not getting enough sun to give us water, or whatever. Right now, for example, I'm being a little lazy because it's summertime and I don't want to fight with snakes, but we got a little leak in our IBC tank fitting, just a little leak, and we might lose 5 gallons a day. But in an SHTF, I would immediately try to fix that so we wouldn't lose that water, so I wouldn't have to run the generator, just to save as much as we could. But in the end, everything we do is self-sustaining. Our water, our energy, our food, all of it. Well, I saw a video today that I know is wrong. They were telling their viewers to stockpile lids in case something ever happened and you wouldn't be able to buy these in an SHTF situation and store them. That's wrong. These lids only last about 5 years, and then the gasket on them start to fail. Now, there will be people in the Facebook group says, oh, I've used lids older than that. I used to buy these quite often, 10 years ago. Every time we went to Walmart, I would buy a box of these, or 2 boxes. And I bet, dozens and dozens of boxes of these. It would last me the rest of my life probably. But sure enough, I tried to use some, a couple years, 3 or 4 years afterwards, and I had a huge failure rate. Now, the problem with a failure rate is, so you store it on the shelf, you forget about it, you go back and check them once a month, and you had a lid that failed, or 10 lids that failed. Well, all that food that you just canned is gone. Well, during an SHTF situation, you don't want to lose 10 jars of food. That's 10 days of food for us. That's a massive amount of food if the chickens aren't producing for some reason, or whatever. Our backup plan is now gone. The other thing is even in good times, right now, Carolyn and I have noticed, I don't know, maybe 5 jars that have failed with these lids. I don't agree with these lids are fine if you want to give out presents, or in my mind, these just not good for an SHTF stockpiling situation. What I recommend is Tattler lids. And I have a product list right here on the screen, either on this corner or this corner. I'm not sure which corner it is. And you can hit the screen, that will pop up and it'll drop down. I'll put this on the product list. These are Tattler lids. And these are reusable. They have a gasket on them. Here's the gasket. Here's the lid. Now, these are pretty expensive, don't get me wrong. But the thing is they're reusable. These, the plastic piece, lasts forever. Never have to replace these. The instruction says on the box, these will last 10 years. Now, all the YouTube channels and articles and blogs that you will see will say you can only use these 10 times. Well, I don't know which is true. Well, I mean, obviously the makers of this knows this is 10 years, but I don't know why 10 times came up. But these are pretty cheap. So what Carolyn and I did, we bought hundreds of these. We have enough to put on every jar that we own. And you figure if we can, every jar, which we don't, every year, this would last us 10 years before we'd have to replace the gasket. Realistically, these gaskets are going to last us 20 years easily. That being said, we could get more if we needed to. I just don't see it as a necessity. So I'm 50 years old. Those lids will take us up to 70 years old. If I have to live past that during an SHTF situation, I've done pretty good. That being said, I also still got the chickens that are going to produce the eggs. The interesting thing about these versus these is we've only had one failure on the shelf with these, just one, whereas we've had several with these. The difference is these tend to fail right when it comes out of the canner. So you let them cool and they're vacuum sealing. Of course, you don't get that satisfying little click that you get with these. I don't know, can you hear that? You don't get that with these plastic ones. So they cool down, you test them, and you realize that they didn't seal. Well, that's okay, because now I can instantly recan them. I can put them back in the pressure canner for the given amount of time, do it over, and then they typically seal. With these, you'd have to use another lid if that happened. Now, I've never had one of these fail outside the canner. They've always sealed. We put them on the shelf. A month later, you'll find one that broke. With the Tattler lids failing instantly, as soon as they come out of the canner, you won't waste any food because you get to recan it. They're not failing on the shelf. Now, I know that is a frustration to a lot of people who can. Oh, I got to do it over, because canning's an all-day process. And then I realize you got to do it over. The other thing you can do is, if you realize they failed and you're out of time for the day, put the jar in the refrigerator. The next morning you can get up and recan them. I would rather do that than waste the food with these lids. So not only is this reusable, adding to our self-sustaining lifestyle, they reduce the amount of wasted food we're going to have. I just think these are a better idea. Now, I'm not selling these. Yes, there's a product list, and I make 10 cents a click off those products, but YouTube's making all the money off this. They're selling them, not me. This is a YouTube sale item. So if you can check out that product list, I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you don't want to look at the product list, check out that super thanks button for me. I'd appreciate that too. So I hope I can inspire you to get ready so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.